Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you all. So Tearlaments, it's about time I got back to them. I think this is actually, this is going to be the deck profile for this season for Tearlaments. I haven't covered them yet. Kind of wild. I usually like to cover top decks a little bit sooner than this, but there's a lot going on this season outside of Tearlaments that's been piquing my interest. I don't hate Tearlaments by any means. There's just other decks I'm a little more excited to play, but as far as Tearlaments go, it might not seem like it on the surface, but this deck has actually had a pretty major shakeup recently that is going to, of course, be the limiting of Tearlaments Sulliek. I saw a lot of people who were saying that, like, oh, they didn't think this was going to be enough of a hit, that they need to do more to Tearlaments to keep them in check, but during the last season, even before Sulliek went to 1, we already saw Tearlaments start to go on a very, very, very sharp decline, and now that Sulliek is at 1 and the deck is less consistent overall in terms of both its ability to search monsters and have some disruption up, I actually don't think it's too outlandish to say that Tearlament might not be the best deck of the meta. Now, it is still, of course, decidedly a Tier 1 deck, but I actually think Sprite might be in as good, if not a bit of a better spot than Tearlament is currently in. And that's even after Sprite also lost a copy of Jet and Swap Frog, too. It's kind of surprising, I mean, not really surprising when you look at how many semi and limited cards are in this deck, but I think a lot of us thought that it was going to take Kitkallos getting banned and all the fusers to be at 1 for Tearlaments to be in a spot where they felt more balanced, and that's actually not the case. I think that Tearlament in its current state is pretty much fine. The deck is probably going to get further hits, but if it didn't, I wouldn't be too terribly upset, honestly. I think it's in a spot now where, again, it feels more fair definitely more fair than it did before. And again, I don't even necessarily think it's the best deck in the current metagame. As far as how I have adjusted the deck for this post-ban list build here with only one Sulliek, haven't really done anything too terribly different, to be totally honest. I'm pretty much filling a lot of the slots that are vacant with stuff like Triple Tactics Talent and Imperms, just good general use cards. Even though Tearlaments did lose consistency by Sulliek going to 1, they are still an extremely consistent deck, and of course still have the ability to play out a lot during your opponent's turn. They do still have access to a lot of really good Super Poly targets. As you can see, I'm still playing 3 Super Poly with not only the Garura, but also the Mudragon of the Swamp. Between these two, you're probably already good enough, and then also Dragostapelia comes up pretty frequently as a Super Poly target as well. So, yeah, I think that Tearlament is in a pretty good spot right now in terms of its balance. It's still being a very, very good deck, and then at the same time still being a relatively, this is relative to how it was before, a relatively fair deck. Now, Tearlaments can still do a lot of disgusting things, particularly on the opponent's turn. It does still have a lot of ability to play out its turns on the opponent's turn. And in that regard, it could still potentially see some more hits. Even though I think it's fine where it is now, I could see Havnis going to 1. I could see potentially Scheiren going to 1 as well. But as far as other things, I knew there was one thing I wanted to talk else about Sulliek going to 1, and that's Foolish Burial Goods. I actually debated not playing this card at all, because with only one Sulliek, if it gets milled before you have a chance to activate Foolish Burial Goods, then the goods is terrible. The only other thing worth sending at all is Scream. At that point, you would only be grabbing Cryme from your deck if you haven't already milled or drawn it. But I still think it's worth it because, even though goods can potentially be dead, at the same time, goods is at its best at exactly the beginning of turn 1 to send Sulliek to grab Reinoheart. So in most situations where you'd want to activate goods anyway, it's already you already want to do it at the start of turn 1. So before you're making any plays, before you even have the opportunity to mill Sulliek. So I think it's pretty rare for that to come up where you have a goods after you've already milled Sulliek and you're sad. I'm not playing Heartbeat either. A lot of people may be like, well, shouldn't you be playing Heartbeat if you only have one Sulliek in order to be able to recycle it? And to that, I say, it's something worth considering, I guess, but I don't think it's worth it overall. Like, if that's what you're trying to use Heartbeat for, if you're mainly trying to use Heartbeat as spell trap disruption, and then incidentally, it's good to get back Sulliek sometimes, like, that's fine, but I don't really value Heartbeat as spell trap removal that highly in this meta. I would rather have stuff like Impermanent Triple Attack, and as far as playing one Heartbeat just to get back the Sulliek, or even more than one Heartbeat, playing Heartbeat period just to get back Sulliek, that's so incredibly specific that I don't think it's worth it. Like, you're talking about playing a card specifically to recover Sulliek if you've already milled Sulliek, and then also if you incidentally mill Heartbeat after you've already milled Sulliek. Like, that's so situational, I just don't think it's worth it. So, I'm not saying Sulliek isn't worth it overall. I think overall Sulliek is still a decent choice for this deck, but I wouldn't play it with the intention of getting back or it's Heartbeat, sorry, I don't think I said Sulliek earlier, but I wouldn't play Heartbeat with specifically the intention of getting Sulliek back. That I think is a mistake. Let's see here. Extra deck is the same. I'm not playing Wallow anymore. I can't remember what I put in instead. I think it might have even been the Bagooska, but Wallow is out just because it is really good when it comes up. It's just, again, a matter of it being a little bit too situational. And times when it is good, not coming up frequently enough. That said, if you don't have a Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal, you could absolutely play Wallow instead. Wallow is only a super rare, unlike Beatrice being an ultra rare. And to be fair, Beatrice hasn't really come up either. But it is a bit more useful to send a monster from deck to graveyard than to banish stuff out of the graveyard with Wallow there. So that is going to go ahead and do it for the list. I'm going to break it down card by card, and then we'll look at some games. We're on 3 Maxx, 2 Tearlaments Merrli, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Tearlaments Havnis, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Tearlaments Scheiren, 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart, 1 Keldo the Sacred Protector, 1 Mudora the Sword Oracle, 2 Kelbek the Ancient Vanguard, 1 Agido the Ancient Sentinel, 1 Bystial Magnamhut, 1 Bystial Druiswarm, 1 Bystial Baldrake, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Reinforcement of the Army, 1 Foolish Burial Goods, 2 Triple Tactics Talent, 1 Primeval Planet's Perlerino, 3 Tearlaments Scream, 3 Super Polymerization, 2 Infinite Impermanence, 1 Tearlaments Cryme, and then our 1 of Tearlaments Sulliek. There is our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 of each of the following: Mudragon of the Swamp, Tearlaments Kitkallos, Garura Wings of Restorant Life, Predaplant Dragostapelia, Tearlaments Rulkallos, 1 Tearlaments Kaliedo-Heart, Abyss Dweller, number 41 Bagooska, the Terribly Tired Tapir, Time Thief Doer, Beatrice Lady of the Eternal, Divine Arsenal, Zeus Sky Thunder, Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, Sprite Elf, Sprite Sprend, and then Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. There's our list. Now let's look at some gameplay. Alright, our first opponent is going to be on Bystial branded Despia. They are on the expulsion lock because this game was played before that went into effect, that bandless update that banned expulsion there. But I don't think it comes up anyway, so it shouldn't be too relevant here. Gonna be taking the first turn. We open the Primeval Planet's Perlerino, only for it to get hit with an Ash Blossom. This is the first time I've opened Perlerino in like a month. Like, I'm not even kidding either when I say that, so I was like, oh cool, finally Perlerino, but yeah, I got hit. But that's actually totally fine because now we get to use Triple Tack to look at our opponent's hand, to put back the Branded Fusion. They also have Albaz, Bystial Lubellion, and Branded Opening. Then going to use the Foolish Burial Goods to send that Sulliek and grab the Reinoheart anyway, even though our Perlerino got hit with the Ash Blossom there. Going to send a Havnis with the Reinoheart and then fuse them into the Tearlaments Kitkallos. You do actually want to use Havnis or Scheiren, not Merrli, because it might come up later that you need to use the Sprite Sprend to send Merrli in order to get the effect off. So try not to use Tearlaments Merrli if possible on your turn 1 unless you're sending it for Sprend. So gonna get our mill 8 here. We are feeling pretty great. Got to use the effects of both Scheiren and Merrli here. Going to use the Merrli in order to fuse the Kitkallos in order to make a Rulkallos. And I'm actually going to use the Scheiren with the Bystial Druiswarm in my graveyard, another dark monster, in order to summon the Mudragon of the Swamp. This will accomplish a couple of things after I said it was Super Poly. This mostly prevents my Rulkallos from being targeted, which is actually really, really good and fairly relevant in case my opponent has like an Imperm or something. But also, I now have the option, if my opponent throws down like a dark monster, to Super Poly the Mudragon and the dark monster away for a Dragostapelia. Alright, opponent's going to move into their turn here. They're going to start by activating Bystial Baldrake in order to grab a Magnamhut. And then activating the effect of Branded Opening. I'm going to chain the Maxx here. It might seem a bit risky to do that because I now don't have a discard target for Super Poly, and my opponent can just choose to add the Albert to hand instead of special summoning it to prevent me from getting a draw there. But I'm actually completely fine if my opponent does that, because remember, they have an Albaz in hand, and what I imagine they're trying to do at this point is bait out my Rulkallos negate, so that way that can't stop the Albaz, but I can also potentially use Super Poly as an Albaz out too. But if my opponent chooses to add Albert and then normal summon it, I don't have to worry about Albaz anymore. Opponent is going to in fact special Albert, activating both its effect and Saronir's. Both are going to resolve. Saronir will send the Branded Retribution, and Albert is going to add a copy of Branded Fusion, which is promptly going to get activated and then negated. I did talk about saving the Rulkallos for the Albaz negate earlier, but Branded Fusion is definitely scary enough that I would rather just go ahead and stop that. And Rulkallos is the only way I can stop Branded Fusion. Albaz I can actually still stop with the Super Poly, so I'm still not particularly scared of the Albaz here. We also get to activate our Merrli's effect. Opponent is going to chain the Magnamhut. I'm actually going to let this just play out. I'm not going to really do much about it here. Because I not only get a draw off the Maxx, but now my opponent does not have a card to discard off of the Albaz there. The only card in hand is Albaz. They do, however, still have the Branded Retribution in the graveyard, so we do have to keep that in mind. However, we also milled the Mudora, so we can also stop the Branded Retribution that way. At this point, I'm just 100% confident I can stop everything my opponent can do here. So, Bystial Baldrake's effect is going to activate, and I'm actually going to chain Magnamhut. That might seem odd, but I know my opponent's going to drop Regained off the Lubellion, and by summoning Magnamhut now, we not only prevent them from drawing off Regained, but also from summoning this Saronir out of their graveyard. So, playing a lot around to my opponent by doing that. They're going to go ahead and activate the Retribution now. I'm going to chain Mudora, and then they're going to concede. Because again, remember, we know because of Triple Attack, the last card in their hand is Albaz. They can normal summon it, but they don't have a discard target for it. And I have a Super Poly down. But even without the Super Poly at this stage in the game, there's not really any way they can out my board at all. So there you go. There's a pretty typical turn one that also shows out how to then play out the disruption you end on after turn one in a way to make sure that our opponent doesn't get to play anything, period. So there's that duel. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one here. This next one is going to be against Naturia Adamantipator, two Earth-based decks that I've been meaning to get back to for quite a while now. I've not seen them played together just yet, but it seems like a novel enough concept. Going to be taking the second turn here. We do open with Ash Blossom and Imperm, so we have a lot of options. Also, second hand, we've opened both Foolishes, which is kind of funny. But it's going to start off with the Naturia Mole Cricket. I'm going to go ahead and Ash Blossom that to ensure that they are not able to get to their Camellia and any other plays. As a result, they are going to use the Cardigan in order to get an extra normal summon for this Researcher, but ooh, I've got the Imperm as well. Normally for Adamantipator, I would save Imperm for the Gallant Granite, but here, I don't think my opponent's going to have anything else afterward. It would be extremely lucky for them to actually have a further play, especially in a 60-card deck, so. Drawing the Agido for turn. Going to start by using the Foolish Burial Goods to send a Sulliek. Opponent is going to Ash Blossom the Sulliek. I could have actually potentially thought about playing the regular Foolish Burial first to play around Ash Blossom, because I think my opponent would have stopped that if I used that to send a Kelbek, which I'll just do now. So, going to be high rolling a little bit here. As you can see, we did end up sending a Tearlaments monster. Thank goodness. Opponent is going to get to summon a Revival Golem, but I'm not particularly concerned. And also, my opponent now has milled their Naturia Sunflowers, so the Mole Cricket that's chilling in their graveyard no longer really concerns me either. I would have only been a little bit worried about that summoning Sunflower plus Camellia, but again, that's just not going to happen here, so. Alright, we'll use Kitkallos to go ahead and grab the Reinoheart, because I don't believe we've actually, yeah, we haven't normal summoned yet, so we would have gotten to do that, but as soon as I activate Scream, my opponent's just going to go ahead and concede. They know what's coming after this, right? I'm going to normal summon the Reinoheart, chain block it with the Scream, I get more mills, I get to send a Tearlaments monster specifically. From there, we get to fuse for either Rulkallos or Kaliedo-Heart. Really just depends on how we mill as far as which one we go for. But probably Rulkallos, because then we would get to keep the... Well, I'd activate Kitkallos' effect. Then we get to keep Agido and Reinoheart on the field in order to potentially make a rank 4. It so depends on what we mill there. So, yeah, there was another duel there. That one was fairly quick, but just shows that how, with enough disruption and also some starters like the Foolishes, we have a pretty easy line and a pretty easy win, even though we went second there. We just still have a couple more games to check out, so let's go straight into the next one here. All right, this game is going to be a mirror match. Our opponent is on Diviner of the Herald, which I've thought about playing a little bit, but I mostly just don't want to devote the extra deck space to the Baron, honestly. Even though the extra deck is relatively open, I still am just like, I'd rather just keep it as it is. So, gonna start by activating Scheiren, sending the Druiswarm, hoping to mill something here, and we don't. So, opponent's going to end-phase Magnamhut, banishing that Druiswarm and getting a search for their own Druiswarm before passing back over to us. Definitely not looking super great, although we do have Super Poly as well as Imperm here, so things are not looking hopeless by any means. Opponent's going to discard and then add Kelbek and activate the Kelbek effect. Very, very risky for my opponent's part. I've said this a million times. I've said it in pretty much every video I play Tears. I've said it in a lot of videos I don't play with Tears or play against them. But maybe my opponent didn't have any other option. But I just don't see, especially when you see how poorly I opened, I don't see why you would ever activate the Kelbek here. As you can see, their mills were pretty mid. Mine were excellent. I hit a tier name, the Sulliek, and a Fairy Tale Snow here. Although I don't think I actually have really much to do with the Sulliek. Yeah, they're going to go ahead and use their Kelbek effect from in hand. Oh, no, sorry, I'm not going to use the Snow yet. I've already activated the Sulliek. Looks like they're also using the Druiswarm to banish my Merrli. But yeah, they're very wisely opting not to activate Agido here. And again, I really don't see why they activated Kelbek in the first place. Especially because they already had a Reinoheart, which they are normal summoning it and not activating the effect. I don't know why they didn't. I think it's because they thought they were going to have lethal here and they felt like they didn't need it. But this is another thing too. So this is a complaint that's very, very specific to Reddit. I don't really see anybody anywhere else complaining about this, but lots of people on Reddit like to complain that, like, oh, my opponent had more than 8,000 damage on board and didn't just swing in for lethal. Why not? They just kept making plays and comboing. It was so rude. This is exactly why you do that. Because my opponent here, normal summoned Reinoheart, did not activate the effect, I think because, again, they thought they just had lethal. But now, hey, surprise, they don't. And turns out it would have been really, really good if they had activated Reinoheart and done more plays. But I don't know if, they were just trying to end the duel as quickly as possible. But for whatever reason, them not activating Reinoheart here is going to cost them dearly. Alright, so it looks like they're going to set a back row before overlaying into an Abyss Dweller. Would be annoying if I did not have the Imperm face down. As my opponent goes to end their turn, I'm going to activate the Fairy Tale Snow to force their Keldo, so that way that's not going to disrupt me on my turn. And I have the 7 spare cards to banish anyway, so it's like, why not? Alright, going to draw for a turn. Actually, funnily enough, getting back that Snow that just got put back in the deck. Opponent's going to activate Abyss Dweller. I get to chain not only the Havnis, but the Imperm. You want to chain it in that order, because Havnis has to be chained directly to the effect that is activating. So we're going to do Havnis and then Imperm to negate the Dweller here. If I had not drawn another monster to discard with Scheiren, I would not activate Havnis here, by the way. But because I did, I still get to activate Scream, summon Scheiren, send Snow, mill a total of 9 cards between Havnis, Scheiren, and Scream. And if I somehow don't have plays and all that, then I still have Fairy Tale Snow in the graveyard, can bring it back, overlay for Time Thief for Dura, detach Scheiren, and then activate a fusion that way. So, plenty of options here, as my Imperm is going to stop the Dweller and stop my opponent from being able to do pretty much of anything here. Havnis did end up milling the Reinoheart, which I would have used here by ditching the Scheiren, but no, they're just going to go ahead and... Actually, I probably would have ditched Scream. I would have had to think about it, but regardless, either way, the opponent is going to concede there. So there's that one, and yet another lesson. Again, one I've harped on about many times, but Do not get it twisted, especially in the mirror match if you don't have to. But even if you don't know what you're playing against, it's really easy for it to be the mirror, so I generally think it's not worth it. But here, my opponent knew I was playing Tearlaments as well, and even saw that my hand was more bricked than theirs. Again, they had the normal summon on the Reinoheart. There's literally no reason to activate Kelbek there. My opponent, in my opinion, completely threw. But we do have another duel. Let's go and take a look at it here. And for this last one, we are going to find ourselves up against Sprite. Which, again, I think could very easily be a better deck in this current meta than Tearlaments. I think a lot of people are going to be like, there's no way, it's Tearlaments. But if you look beyond the fact that it's Tearlaments and there's still a relatively, not full power, but a lot of power, and analyze the deck as to how it's competing and faring in this particular meta, I think it's kind of hard to call Tearlament far and away the best deck. Even if Tearlament is the best deck, I think it's not by a lot at all. So, as you can see, my Sprite opponent is going to get to do pretty much their whole combo line here. Especially as Gigantic comes down, I can no longer summon the Bystials, and I couldn't before because my opponent didn't have a Light or a Dark engraved, so... yeah, at this point, we're just going to watch our opponent do their full turn 1 combo. At the very least, we can take solace in the fact that our hand is absolutely cracked, so... and the other cool thing, too, is that even if our Tearlaments stuff gets stopped, we potentially have the ability to use the Bystials to make a Beatrice and use that to set up some plays as well. This is the kind of hand where Beatrice is looking pretty good in our extra deck. Alright, so it looks like our opponent is wrapping up their turn 1. They are grabbing the Melfi of the Forest to search for the Caddy. But it doesn't seem like... oh, they still have the starter. I was going to say, it doesn't seem like they have much else beyond that, but they have the carrot as well, so... alright, passing back over to us. We have our fair share of disruption to play through, but again, this is absolutely the hand to do it with. I'm going to start by activating Scream. Opponent is going to use Carrot to negate and destroy it. I don't think that's a great move, honestly, because now I get to just search for a Tearlaments trap card. I'll grab Cryme so that way I can still potentially mill Sulliek here. But we don't mill Sulliek, we just mill the Foolish Burial Goods instead. Yeah, even though I didn't have any of their spell and trap cards in hand, I don't know. The Carrot for the Scream there is a little bit odd. I don't think it's super great. Although, to be fair, it is actually going to be enough to stop us, and maybe those extra 3 mills would have gotten us an extra play, because even though we managed to mill a ton of cards here, the only relevant thing we hit was a Reinoheart, which is getting threatened by a DD Crow, so I'll go ahead and just put it back with the, what do you call it, the Shuffler there. Alright, so I'm going to start by normaling the Merrli. Opponent's going to chain the Penny in hand in order to bring out a Herald of the Arclight. I knew this was coming. I knew my opponent was going to do this to force me to mill my top 3, but I actually still have plays here. But first I'm going to go ahead and move to the battle phase. I'm going to try to do that. Opponent's going to respond by activating the Sprite Elf. I'm going to chain Druiswarm on the monster that they're targeting, but that's mostly just to get them to use their Herald. I'm going to respond with the Baldrake, which that finally gets them to use their IP here. So it looks like they are not going for an Avermax, which I was a little bit concerned about, but they're instead going for the Topologic Zero Boros. I'm not a huge fan of this card, to be honest. Like, I feel like Avermax is better in pretty much every other circumstance that you would be summoning the Zero Boros. Now, you might argue that it is better against stuff like Tearlament, but we're going to go ahead and end up playing around the Zero Boros pretty well here anyway. Gonna go ahead and make the Sprint. Sprint is gonna send Merrli to then allow us to fuse for the Kitkallos. And as long as we can avoid summoning into a link zone, we should be good to go here. Alright, opponent is going to now fire off the Zero Boros, as I have no choice but to summon Reinoheart into the Sprint zone. But I'm totally fine with this because, yeah, my opponent gets to banish the whole field, but, like, I just set up I just still have like a Havnis I just set up in the graveyard. I have a Scheiren effect that's activating. Yeah, because I knew we'd have more mills and chain links following the Zero Boros banish. I mean, this is pretty much the exact reason why I say I'm not a huge fan of Zero Boros. I think Avermax tends to be better. But I was just going to end up conceding even after successfully resolving the Zero Boros there. So that'll do it for these games. Thank you all for watching. Now let's move to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack, you'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation, you do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Maxx. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.